Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the APLU webinar at home edition. My name is Patty O'Sullivan. I'm the program manager in academic innovation at the University of Mississippi. And I'm here today with our panel from Colorado State University. Before I introduce them, I just want to note to you that we will be taking questions and answers your questions in the Q&A section of your Zoom. If you just roll over with your cursor on the bottom of your screen, you'll see that. So if you could enter your questions into the Q&A rather than the chat, we are going to get to those at the end of the webinar. So Colorado State University is one of 8 institutional recipients of a 4-year APLU grant, the Accelerating Adoption of Adaptive Courseware. So our panelists today are going to talk about the Learning Assistance Program that they have combined with that grant. So up first is Tanya Buckham. She's an instructional designer at the Institute for Learning and Teaching at Colorado State University. Next we have Stacy Clark. She is the Learning Assistant Program Coordinator at Colorado State University. And we have Dr. Deborah Garrity, who is a professor and director of the Life Sciences Core Curriculum at Colorado State University. So welcome, everyone. So I guess my first question is for Stacy. Can you just give us an overview of the Learning Assistant model?
Sure. The next slide. Yeah, perfect. So the Learning Assistant model is a research-informed model that's been around about 19 or 20 years now. It originally came out of CU Boulder, and it's a way to, if you look at with traditional instruction, if I'm an instructor and I have 300 students, it's really challenging for me to do active learning with them, to create community, to create accountability with one another, to show up. It's very easy to not show up in an auditorium of 300 students. Nobody notices that I'm not there necessarily. So, and that's not to say that you can't use the LA model in smaller classes. You can, and I'll talk more about that later. But with the when implementing the LA model, what happens is you have the ability as an instructor, by utilizing learning assistants, which are a type of undergraduate peer educator, you have the ability to break up your class into smaller groups and circulate through the room. Your LAs circulate through the room, and you can do small group discussion, small group problem solving. You increase sense of belonging and community in your classroom. The LAs are an amazing barometer of what's really going on in the classroom. There's 3 really important components. Next slide. And one of them, if you see where it says content prep meeting, the LAs meet every week with the instructor, and that gives the opportunity for the instructor to review the material coming up that next week, to go over the active learning activities. And these don't have to be, 20-minute active learning activities that involve, hula hoops and gummy worms. These might be clicker questions, think, pair, shares, small group interactions that might last 10 minutes. Clicker questions that might last 5 minutes. But the other thing that's really important that happens at the prep meetings every week is that the LAs let the instructors know this is what the students are not getting, because it's hard as the instructor to know. And that's a really important piece, I think. The other piece is, that the lead LAs, the LAs go to a weekly, or maybe it can be anywhere from 1 credit to 3 credits, pedagogy course that helps them with things like high quality question asking, understanding Bloom's taxonomy and how to elicit critical thinking in your students, how to facilitate small groups. We've all been in small group situations where it was kind of like this, and we've been in small group situations that have been really high quality, and we get a lot out of it. They also facilitate the interactions as far as bringing the level up with helping those small groups function effectively. And then, of course, Debbie Garrity is going to talk in a second. I work with Debbie a lot. She has a Life 102 class that she has used LAs in, and the LAs come to lecture section Monday, Wednesday, Friday, while Debbie is doing interactive clicker questions and her other thing. And I would say I'd love to hear from Debbie about like the specifics of working in these three areas, not so much the pedagogy course. I get to teach that at CSU, and I really enjoy that. But Debbie, if you could talk a little bit about the others.
Yeah, so go ahead, Debbie. Can you tell us how the Learning Assistance Program is integrated into your course?
Sure. So the course that I teach is called Life 102, Attributes of Living Systems, and it's basically a freshman biology course for majors. We run in the fall about 6 sections of 325 students each. And with the learning assistants, we've been trying to keep to about 1 to 25 student ratio. So for every section, that would be 13 learning assistants. And we have kind of ramped this up over several semesters. Starting in fall 2018, we had 1 section that began working with learning assistants taught by myself and another co-instructor. And then in the spring, we had a 2nd section with 2 more different instructors. And then this past fall, we've been running 4 sections and again, some additional instructors. So an important component of making all this work, just in the background realm of things, is that the instructors be working together as a team and sharing what we've learned, sometimes just about very simple logistical things. And then also we've set up a Teams website to share some of the content that we've developed for the courses. So to get back to Stacy's question, we have learned a lot already in our first 3 semesters of doing this about working with learning assistants in the classroom. All of us have taught using an active learning methodology before, but we have found that we need to make some adjustments in order to fully take advantage of the opportunity that having these learning assistants on site gives us. And this started with, at the very first day of class, to be very open and explicit about why are we doing the things that we do? Why do we have learning assistants in this class? And I've been emphasizing the idea of practice and feedback and how important that is for learning. And I told the students, well, you know, you could come here and listen to me talk for 50 minutes, but what if you came here and we actually worked on problems and you were able to get some immediate feedback on areas that you had difficulties, and we could incorporate that in more of a blended fashion where it's not just me delivering content, but that us working together in teams. So I think being explicit about that rationale for the students is important for them to buy into this model, because after all, they're probably not used to working in this sort of a format before. Secondly, we learned something about when we're going to do activities with learning assistants, it really works best if they're not 2-minute activities. Because in a class of our size, there's just not time for the learning assistants to spread out and strike up conversations. And, you know, by the time all that gets going, then the instructor is ready to move on. So we began developing activities that are deliberately designed to take at least 5 minutes. What works best is maybe 10 minutes or 15 minutes, or if you want to go even longer, half the class section. So I know this is difficult for instructors to both develop the activities, but it's also difficult for them to give up their content time. But there are a lot of advantages that can be gained to using learning assistants in that way. Secondly, the prep meeting with the learning assistants every week, as Stacy mentioned, this turns out to be unexpectedly insightful for the instructor. So talk about feedback and practice, that really turned out to be something that instructors benefit from too. So the learning assistants would give us feedback every week, And, you know, sometimes I would be aware of things that students weren't getting just because I've taught this for many semesters. But in other cases, you know, it just honestly never occurred to me that somebody could get sidetracked in this particular way. We also started doing the actual exercises with the learning assistants in those prep meetings so that the learning assistants would be very comfortable with that material. And a benefit there was that they would sometimes suggest modifications to me about, oh, you know, you really don't need 5 examples, 2 would make the point, and this could be more simply presented. So I really gained from that as well. The third component is the pedagogy component, and something that we learned as we went along is that our learning assistants are really not experts on content here. So that would come up with the students because sometimes they couldn't answer a question, the learning assistants could not answer a question that the students posed. But we reframed this somewhat to have the learning assistants think of themselves as emerging experts on how learning happens. So I think this took some of the burden off of them about having to be experts in content, although they do really ramp up quickly with that. And to think more about how to prompt the students to get to the next level of solving this question, or how are we going to figure this out. And the pedagogy course was really valuable in that. For example, one of the topics that they cover is high quality question asking, so that when the learning assistants circulate around, they're not just giving out answers, but they are prompting the students to think about how to figure it out for themselves. So I think I'll stop there and let some other questions be asked.
Thank you, Deborah. So Tanya, I'm curious, what's your role and the role of the Institute for Learning and Teaching in the Learning Assistance Program?
Well, so I am an instructional designer, and I'm also the program manager for the Adaptive Courseware Grant. And as part of the grant, we were reaching out to different faculty that were kind of in our target, of which Life 102, 103 was part of that target. And so we worked with Debbie and her team on incorporating adaptive courseware into her class and all of their sections. And the team, it was really kind of an exciting process because the team really came together and shared resources of different things that they were already doing in their courses. And so they kind of developed a bit of a library. It was also an opportunity for them to look at outcomes for the courses and what are the common outcomes. Because sometimes what happens is when you have a large number of instructors teaching courses, they may have target outcomes, but sometimes other ones kind of get woven into. So it was really a chance for them all to come together as a team. And so what we ended up doing is really kind of looking at the adaptive courseware as a foundation and a way for students to hopefully kind of get more on the same page and prepare them to come to class to do more of this active learning. And then one of the, aside from maybe coming up with a few other activities, something that kind of emerged out of this was, hey, let's look into this learning assistance program, because that it was starting to gain a little traction on campus, and this might be a really good opportunity to help students, you know, in these classes of, you know, 200 and 300 students. The LAs would really be a good way to help faculty do more active learning with them.
Great, thank you. So my next question is for you, Tanya, and for Stacy. I guess it's 2 parts. First, are you using learning assistants in any other disciplines other than biology? And then the second question is whether or not you've solicited formally or informally student feedback. You know, what are the students saying about being in classes that use learning assistants?
Yeah, I'll take the first part. The learning assistant model really did start in STEM, and it has definitely been for many years expanding into the humanities. But we at CSU, we have LAs in Life 102, so in biology, in chemistry, in microbiology, math, And more recently, there's a new composition class that is utilizing, and this is a small class. This would be an example of a small class. It's a new class that was just created for folks, students who are struggling and concerned about those first comp classes as they enter college. And so there's smaller classes with learning assistants, and the learning assistants really help with how to learn, how to be successful in the class, how to this was difficult for me too. So there's that. What am I missing? Oh, physics uses them a lot, and it's very successful in physics. So that's some of the areas.
All right, and then the student experience, Tanya, have you gotten any feedback from students on what it's like to be in a class that uses learning assistants?
Yes, so we have collected survey data at the end of the semester for definitely for Life 102, and I believe some of the other courses are getting that data as well. And so far, the feedback has been really positive from students. They've enjoyed having students there and having a peer helping them with their learning. There has been a little bit of feedback, kind of to what Debbie had mentioned, sometimes that, well, they're not experts in the field. And so, so I think that's helped inform then what Stacy and Debbie have done in subsequent semesters as well. So, but overall, it's pretty positive. And then I think Stacy and Debbie may have more information specifically about that as well.
Yeah, I can speak to that in a little bit more of a qualitative response. So the students overall have been just so appreciative of the support. And it was kind of interesting to me because initially I was thinking of this really in terms of academic support, but it turned out to have this synergistic benefit that they felt like they had a partner, and were just so appreciative that people would come by the table and ask them how they were doing. And so I think one of the things I've been learning as an instructor is just how important the community is in the classroom. And working with learning assistants it's a learning curve for the undergraduate students themselves, because here they are in this huge class. They're not quite sure what's expected of them. They're mostly freshmen, and they think the material is super challenging. And so even just asking them to talk to their neighbor, that's kind of a hurdle. You have to get used to it and overcome. But in working with the learning assistants, I saw that they would tend to sit at the same table every day. So their group of 4 quickly became friends. And so you walk into the classroom, everyone's talking together. And this is an 8 a.m. class, and I was still able to see about 70% attendance. And I think it's just because, in part, it was due to that, having a friendly environment there, and the learning assistants helped make that happen.
So that's fascinating. You're kind of expressing this idea that students are understanding that their role as students in the classroom is changing. It's, your class is maybe not what they expected in a large lecture class. I'm also curious to hear from you, and also from Stacy and Tanya, what you think on the instructor end of this. The role of the instructor is changing significantly, and how do they adjust to becoming active instructors, not just lecturing?
Yes.
And any one of you can take this. Tanya, you can talk about maybe how you support faculty to become active instructors, and Stacy, how the Learning Assistance Program does that. But Deborah, let's hear from you first.
Yeah, so huge learning curve for instructors. As I mentioned, when we realized we needed to do longer segments of active learning in the class and to really design these with learning assistants in mind, well, that means creating a whole batch of new exercises and materials. So one thing we do to try to help that along is that we have this Teams website where all the instructors teaching Life 102 post activities that they've created, and we just share openly and freely with each other. That being said, however, each instructor seems to want to develop his or her own things anyway, so maybe that just means our pool of exercises will increase over time. There's been a struggle with instructors because we have to, quote, give up some content coverage in order to make time to using the learning assistants. And that discussion has really driven us back to thinking about what are our learning objectives for this class? I mean, what are we trying to accomplish here? And over time, we have decided to drop this or that piece of content because we have found that using the in-class time with learning assistants has been so productive. And I would rather have them learn the more critical things in our learning objectives more solidly than cover, you know, a super amount of things that they're, well, frankly, going to forget much of it anyway. So.
Stacy and Tanya, do either of you want to talk about what it's like to help faculty move into a role of being active instructors?
Sure. Maybe Stacy, I'll start first because it's a little bit maybe more the foundation, and then you can talk about that next level. And so what we do when we first meet with faculty, and this is particularly for the grant, but we do this just in our regular instructional design as well, is we really do focus on what are the outcomes for the course, because it's a good time to kind of shore things up, especially if maybe a course has been inherited from other faculty over time. So we go back to that and really look at what are those core outcomes, and then do a bit of backwards design when we think about the types of activities and how they're going to get feedback from students, how they're going to assess students. So we really try to sit down and do that. And it kind of depends. Sometimes we work with just faculties as individuals. So we'll do individual consultations like that, or as in the case with the Life 102 faculty, we did that more as a team over the course of a semester. So that's the one piece we offer. And then the other thing that we did, particularly for the grant, was to bring faculty together a few times a semester in what we were calling faculty collaboration meetings. And so that was really an opportunity for our biology faculty to talk to econ faculty, or even some of our languages faculty, and kind of figure out, you know, what was working with adaptive courseware, but then also what was it allowing them to do then in class in terms of active learning. And they could really share strategies and ideas. And sometimes even some faculty would observe each other in action so they could see what they were doing and how they could maybe institute that in their courses. So yeah, it's been a really interesting and exciting effort. So so that kind of laid the foundation then for folks to talk to Stacy, and we would actually invite Stacy to those meetings as well. So.
Well, great. Stacy, do you want to add anything to what Tanya has laid out?
Sure. What stands out to me for how the Learning Assistant Program supports instructors is that we want to make it as, it's a lot of work, as Debbie was saying. It's a lot of work for instructors to transform their courses. And we encourage them to transform slowly. Don't change everything, change 10%, or change, you know, like implement slowly in a reasonable way, because we want to work together for many semesters. So I really try to just support instructors in a variety, and departments in a variety of ways, such as for Life 102, for instance, LAs are paid hourly. That's not always the case. Sometimes LAs and other departments, they take supervised college teaching credit and they do the experience for teaching credit, for supervised college teaching credit that goes on their transcript. But we try to work with departments to figure out creative ways in which we can pay students hourly. We know that we will build a more diverse student staff if we pay students. There are some students who will never be able to do supervised college teaching because they have to work. And so I work with recruiting and hiring, and then helping the instructors be successful with that first day with their LAs, that first week with their LAs, to really build a teaching learning team and share resources with them as far as like examples of agendas for your weekly prep meetings, and we have a lot of back and forth, like this is what's going on with my LAs. And then what happens, at least with some of the partners within CSU, that the Learning Assistant Program, until the learning in the, where Tanya and I work, the department that Tanya and I work in, is that I also supervise their time clock. So the effect on the LAs and the effect on the instructors is that everybody together learns skills to implement the LA model effectively. And I try to do that in such a way to make the instructor's job and their role in this as easy as possible, because they take on a lot, especially the first and second and third semesters as they're getting up and going.
Yeah, I
So
could
let's-
just add,
Oh, go
if I
ahead.
could, I just add something to that, that the faculty teamwork and sharing aspect is just really critical here. So I don't think this would have been nearly as successful if we hadn't had Stacy on board. And what's going to happen is that there are just all these little logistical things that come up. And what we were able to do is put together a best practices packet for new instructors coming on that suggested simple ways to get around common problems. And we actually had a one-day workshop where we introduced some of these ideas. And I really agree with Stacy that the idea is to let the faculty focus on their content, exercise, and intellectual aspects, and try to support them as much as possible to keep the logistical or, you know, more mundane kinds of things under control. Thanks.
So that's great. So this is all raising in my mind, though, this idea of, like you talked about the logistics. Let's talk about the big logistical elephant in the room. I assume Colorado State has joined the many other universities that has decided to take the rest of the semester going online in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. So this is really for all of you, but you can split it up how you want. But how has that, I guess I just want confirmation, yes, you've done that, but then how has that affected, Deborah, your class specifically, but then also how you run the Learning Assistance Program? Have you taken that online as well?
Stacy, do you want to take a stab at that?
I'll take the taking the Learning Assistant Program online from the following perspective. In addition to the, for instance, Life 102 LAs being in lecture with Debbie and doing small group discussion during lecture, they also provide outside class time study sessions, and we call those Life 102 Knowledge Builders. And right now in Life 102 we have 26 LAs, and it is an important goal of ours to keep our LAs employed. They need their student hourly paycheck, and so we have been charged with putting peer academic support online. So we, for instance, I'll give you an example from Life 102. We're doing this for Chem 111 as well, by the way. We created a Canvas shell, and we will be using Microsoft Teams, and the LAs, we are in the process of building a schedule, and the LAs will be live online Monday through Friday, 11 a.m. until 9 p.m. And in this way, we can keep the LAs employed. They will also continue to have their weekly prep meetings with instructors and online. And it is a steep learning curve, but one of the topics we teach in the pedagogy course is growth mindset. So we've all got this major growth mindset going on. We go live Monday, and we hope to bring in many, many students to show up to the live interactive Life 102 Knowledge Builders. And very much like when we're in the Great Hall, which is one of our larger tutoring halls at CSU, LAs will arrive and depart, and students will arrive and depart. And we'll use whiteboard, and we'll do active learning activities with them online, and we'll do practice quizzes. Yeah, it's really exciting, actually.
Well, I'm really excited that you were able to keep those students employed and keep that learning experience going for the students taking Deborah's class and other classes that are using learning assistants. I think that's really, really important. And I say that as someone who works at a university, but also as the mother of a child who lost her job at a university because of this situation. So that's fantastic. Tanya, do you want to add anything to the shift online? I'm sure your office was really busy in the last weeks trying to get people ready for this.
Yeah, so we were a little bit fortunate in the sense that all of this kind of hit right before we were going on spring break. So we had a little bit of extra time to help get faculty prepared. And so it was kind of a combination between the Institute for Learning and Teaching, so our group, ACNS, which is our academic computing group, and then we have each department has Canvas coordinators within it. And so it was kind of this really big group effort where about 2 weeks ago, when we realized that we were going to be going online, we were able to catch faculty right before the end of the semester and tell them what our plans were. And so then some other folks behind the scenes were putting together a Keep Teaching website. So we were able to tell faculty about that. Like, it's not populated yet, but we're putting everything on here, and this is what we think it's going to look like. And at that point, we thought that the university was actually going to only be online through April 10th. And then faculty and students left. We set up a chat space and a phone line that a bunch of us were personing basically like 7 a.m. till 8 p.m. as folks all left campus. And then probably the Monday or Tuesday of spring break, the decision was made that all classes were going to be online for the rest of the semester. And that spring break was extended and yesterday. So actually, normally students and faculty would have reported Monday, but classes just started up yesterday, Wednesday. So, so the faculty have been amazing, and fortunately, a fair amount of them, even though they taught on campus and face-to-face classes, have been using Canvas in some way. So they were much more comfortable, I think, trying new things in Canvas than if they had never used it at all before. So we actually didn't quite get as much of the surge that we thought we would from faculty needing our assistance, helping them get their courses online, but we'll see, because it's kind of emerging. So we'll see now that faculty are starting to work with students, maybe some little hiccups here and there that, so we're just here to help them in the way we can and give them some ideas that it can't be what you might typically put together for an online course, because faculty didn't design the course to be taught online, or students did they think they were going to take an online course. So what's kind of the best way to move forward in this time frame? So
well, you know, it's funny that you say that. It reminds me of something that Deborah had actually said earlier about asking faculty to really think about their learning objectives and distilling down to what the essential information is. I know that at the University of Mississippi, with our Keep Teaching unit, that's exactly what we did. We tried to get faculty to think about what content can you eliminate. So Deborah, talk to me about that, because it sounds like you've already went through that process in your classes, in your biology classes. Is that a struggle now to cut even more out of the semester? Like, how are you handling this transition?
So specifically with having gone online, so I think that there's a couple of things that I have had in mind as potential stumbling blocks for students as they get used to this idea. Many of them have probably never taken an online class. I've never taught one. So one thing I wanted was to be sure to try to keep that sense of live connection and just the ability to interact. And so there's lots of modalities, Zoom or non-real-time conversations, or even chat. In terms of content, I'm basically keeping it more or less the same. But we had a lot of discussions about assessments. So what are we going to do for our assessments to discourage students from cheating, because we can't really effectively proctor all of them. And the students are very anxious about what it's going to be like to take an exam online. And I just feel they're already going through a lot of stress. So what I did in that case was I scaled back my online exam points. So first, I am going to have exams online, but I scaled back the points to only 80% of what I had originally planned. And then the last 20% are going to be just small little daily things that they do on Canvas, and they'll get 2 points here, 2 points there for doing there. And part of my thinking here is that I'm worried that students are going to not be in the mindset that this is still college and that they need to keep up. And so I wanted to give them some really concrete things that they should be doing every day, every class day, as part of this class. And so some of the online activities that we did, I just converted to a Canvas quiz. I mean, it's not really a timed quiz or anything like that, but they just put in their answers using that tool on Canvas. And then some of these other participation points, well, you know, it is an opportunity to do different things. For example, they could watch a 5-minute video on some current aspect of material that we're talking about. And I'm just taking it as an opportunity to be creative about the content and to see what can be done here. So it's kind of fun, actually.
So Stacy, you're only 2 days into this, but are you hearing from the learning assistants? What has this transition been like for them?
Yeah, we, like many universities that are utilizing the LA model, we have lead LAs and LAs. And lead LAs are experienced LAs who've applied for a lead LA position, and they get paid a little bit more, and they support the new LAs, which is very important. And I think that they support the faculty in an even more significant ways than the rest of the LAs sometimes. And so I've been meeting with them every day, and their student perspective, for instance, one of my superstar lead LAs, she created the content and the structure within the Canvas shell, and she did it from a student perspective. What she created is so beyond anything I could have created on my own. So I work with the lead LAs every single day, and I'm in the process of scheduling the rest of the 26 Life 102 LAs and 14 chemistry LAs. And once everybody's scheduled, I'll have a bigger meeting with all of them, and then we go live Monday.
Wow. Okay. Well, I feel like we're going to need to check in with you to see how that goes. So I have a question, and again, this is for
a reality TV show.
Yeah, where are they now? So let's just be optimistic and pretend that at some point we can all go back to the way we used to teach and the way universities used to operate. Do you all have some advice for institutions that are looking to implement the learning assistant system at their schools?
I can answer that. So one piece of advice would be to really think of this as a process that builds. So it's okay if you take several semesters to ramp it up before launching it to all 1,000 students taking biology every fall. So because you're going to learn along the way things that make it run better. Second piece of advice would be to, as much as possible, really build the community of the instructors, the Teaching Institute colleagues, and just all of the players here to really get them talking and sharing, because it's just so much easier if you don't have to completely reinvent the wheel for every new section of a course or for every new type of course across campus. There's a lot that we can learn and share with each other face to face. The third component I would say is really the support, professional development support for faculty and for the learning assistants throughout this whole process. And that's one thing I like about the three-legged model is that two of the legs are really about developing the learning assistants and their capacity to work effectively. And I think that's just such a critical component of it that maybe people might not have thought about as much if they've never used learning assistants before.
Stacey and Tanya, do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Stacey.
I agree with everything that that Debbie just said, and I would say that from a administrative perspective, you have to find your champions, and there's a lot of research, so you need to present that research to different audiences the way they're going to digest it and be convinced by it easiest. And so the provost office and whoever's working there who you need as a champion, maybe they love statistics and you're going to share a lot of research and statistics with them. Maybe other folks, they want to hear the qualitative, they want to hear student quotes about their experience working with LAs. They want to hear quotes from LAs. And there is a lot of research out there. At the end of this, I think we're going to share a slide with you that gives a website. It's called the Learning Assistant Alliance. And they literally have slideshows there that are like, to help you convince other folks at your university that this is a good thing. Because it is a three-legged model and there's a lot of flexibility. Those things have to be present and done well in order to implement with fidelity and expect any kind of positive outcomes. But outside those three things, it can look a lot of different ways. So you can do a good job convincing administration to convince other departments to find non-traditional partners. So for instance, the LA program, I'll give one example and then finish up with this. But we recently started working with the Office of Financial Aid. Some universities, the funding for the LA program is centralized. Some universities, it's decentralized. We're kind of a hybrid, but it's mostly decentralized at this point. And so we have to be very creative how we fund help different departments find the funds to have LAs. So recently we've been working on this for about a year actually, with the Office of Financial Aid in order to more easily tap into work study funds. So we are being creative and decreasing, for instance, Debbie's budget we've infused a certain percentage of those LA's salaries with work study. So that is great for everybody. And that's not necessarily, the Office of Financial Aid is not necessarily a partner you think of right away for an successful LA program. So.
That's great. Tanya, what's your advice for institutions that are thinking about starting a learning assistant program?
I think probably would be just to be open-minded and look at the research and look at the Learning Assistance Alliance model, because we've had a lot of great results with it at Colorado State. And so just, I think, really be open-minded and give it a try, actually. Pretty simple.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and bring up that resource slide. If we could have that, and then maybe Stacey could just review for us. There we go. Can you just walk us through, Stacey, the different, I know you mentioned it before, but now that we've got the slide, you can maybe talk about the resources posted here.
Sure. The Learning Assistant Alliance, you have to join, but it's free. And then you have access to all sorts of resources. And that's everything from instructors going there to find activities that are curriculums or content specific. So there's physics activities there, and there's biology and different aspects of biology, because of course that's very broad. So there's a lot of resources for instructors. There's also resources for instructors as far as running successful, impactful weekly prep meetings. And that includes videos and really pointing out this is, and then there's like circles and this works well, and what do you think about that? And the same thing, there's also videos showing LAs operating in a classroom setting and interacting in small group settings. There's also, they have a thing called LA Lasso. LA, okay, I don't know what they all stand for, but it's a place where if you want to tap into their data collection, they can help you immensely with data collection. And then you can continue to tell your story to the folks who need to hear it and be convinced. Yeah, there's just a ton of resources. Check it out.
Excellent. So any final thoughts from our panelists before we wrap up?
One thing that we didn't pop up with yet is the effect of all this on the learning assistants themselves. And that also is a really valuable outcome of this whole product. They take on this role as leaders in their community. They gain confidence. They have the opportunity to interact really closely with the faculty member, even give advice to the faculty member. They end up learning the material really well. So I think there are just so many positive things for the learning assistants themselves.
Great. Stacy, Tanya, any final thoughts?
Well, one thing I'd like to add, and I think Stacy mentioned this, but maybe just to reiterate, if at all possible, try to collect the data as you go along, just so that way you can share that with other folks. I know that Stacy has been sharing it with upper admin, but also maybe with some other, like Office of Sponsored Programs, to try to see if maybe there's a benefactor out there who might be interested in helping support the program in the future. And I love that Debbie brought up about also looking at the benefits for the students as learning assistants, because you figure this is could potentially be a life-changing or career-changing activity for them. Maybe they may want to decide they want to become a biology teacher or do research, or so just kind of try to collect the data as you go along and use that to help support and help the program grow later on.
Yeah, I would echo what both Tanya and Debbie said as far as like the impact on the LAs. I see it every day. It's an amazing opportunity for leadership and growth for them. And from LAs themselves, I really only get incredibly positive feedback, and many of them come back semester after semester. The other thing I would say is at the first big training of the year for new LAs, I always start with saying, you will change lives. And they do.
That's great. That's a great final thought to have at the end of this as we wrap up. So I would like to thank our panelists. I'd like to thank Colorado State University. I'd like to thank the Personalized Learning Consortium at the APLU and Every Learner Everywhere for helping sponsor this webinar. I just want to remind our participants and viewers that this webinar is being recorded. It will be shared out on the APLU website, but also with participants through their email. And please follow us on Twitter. You see the Twitters are up there, everylearner.net and APLU News. And just a reminder to our audience that the next webinar that the APLU is sponsoring is going to be April 7th. There'll be more details on that coming at you through your email and also on Twitter and on their website. So thank you everyone for joining us, and have a great rest of your week.